Einar Gustafsson, a name that should mean something to many of us because Einar is an absolute talent in the world of product management, but also a name that means a lot to me and the history of fintech, even if the history of fintech doesn't know it. You see, Einar Gustafsson is one of the minds and the architects behind some of the most successful wins from Finovate back in the day. Company him and I used to be early employees of, called Meniga. We shaped the industry in our time, and the stories we tell today are from back then. You'll notice we don't go into too much tea, so to speak. There won't be very hot piping pieces of gossip from back in the day, although Einar and I could probably spend weeks with a pint of non-alcoholic beer talking about those stories. But we've learned a lot, we've built a lot. We were there when fintech was built, we were there when banks changed into digital money. We made some things happen together. We've come up with the term of emotional banking together back in the day. You'll hear that story from being on a plane somewhere towards Australia. There are names of some of the people that we have worked with being mentioned, most of them fondly. But this episode is really just a walk down memory lane from those days of extreme innovation and the genuine drive for building propositions that would help people's lives and create genuine and true money moments, which is what Einar and I and the people helping us build the future of digital were after back in the day. And so we invite you to come on over and listen to us just going down the memory lane, and then hopefully in another episode Einar and I will start spinning some of the beans as well, if we remember any. But for the most part, we worked hard, we had a lot of fun, we built the future of money, and these are our stories. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales from the FinTech Crypt. I have an incredibly special guest today, and we don't yet know how we're going to release this. It might be my first guest, my third, but very, very high up, because Einar has been the beginning of fintech to me, and the beginning of the journey that it started back in God's 2000 and I now want to say 2008, 2000 and God's almighty. I don't want to give our age quite right away. But welcome to the show, Einar. There will be a cute here intro about yourself that will urge people to have seen your accomplishment on LinkedIn, so fear not, they know how awesome you are. But thank you for accepting to chat to us and share some of the tea from the crypt.
Well, thank you, Duena. Happy to be here, and great to see you again after all these
Finally
years.
laying eyes on each other after all these years. Almost. we obviously orbit each other digitally. No one would think when we've not remained quite close friends over these years, but we have met just as our kids were entering the world. Actually, we were reminiscing about this one. All right.
Yeah,
So
pretty much.
A good.
Yeah. 20,
right. So
2010, I guess.
14, 15 years ago now. God. Right. No. That's I was pregnant with my little one, so it would not be quite that yet. We're not quite that. That's right.
Yeah, you were pregnant when you joined the company. That's right.
The
Yeah,
baby was entering before me in the room when I joined the company. That's actually an amazing thing. I haven't really heard of many people getting a job when they're that pregnant. So I hope that more industries open up and do that. At that time, we just wanted to get one done. So hats off to our CEO and visionary at the time. I'm sure Georg will be listening at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's a Scandinavian thing, but like we didn't really think of it. I mean, we just needed somebody great on the team, and the fact that you were heavily pregnant at the time wasn't a blocker. We can wait. I also remember your maternity leave not being too long. Did you only take because you lived in Sweden at the time, you could have taken like a year or even two. I think it took them like 2 weeks. We were like, what?
Very, very well civilized child that kindly didn't bother our pre-Finovate efforts much at the time. Yes.
Yeah, but to be fair, when the visionary scouted us both, the visionary in question being our former CEO at the time of Meniga, Georg Ludvigsson, you guys should go look him up. When he did, he did say to me, like, I'll be honest with you, much as I'd love for you to go away and cook some jam, we're going to be needing to push this company earlier than the child being preschool. So of course, we knew that we're making this happen together, and quite frankly, we wouldn't have had it any other way. I think you and I have had quite some nights and flights around the world looking at our kids through cameras, photos, and various Zoom calls. Skype calls. There were no Zoom calls back in the day.
Exactly, yeah, Skype calls. I think I calculated once, I think I flew to the moon and back in total.
They had that amazing app. What was the name of it? Whatever. It was Trips or the Trip was calculated, and then at one point you and I found we had a different account that we hadn't even included. It had another 500,000 flights.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we traveled the world together. We didn't quite explain this to our listeners, but Einar and I were part of this company building financial technology very early when the idea of financial technology was only just going about. We were part of these foundational blocks. I would say you can read more about the details of our lives and our fight back then in my book, Emotional Banking. That, of course, document an episode that I don't know if Einar remembers or not. Namely, how did we end up with the idea of emotional banking, Einar?
So if I recall correctly, of course, this is 2013 or 2014. We were on a flight to Australia. We were speaking at the Next Bank Sydney. I know we had a quick stop in Dubai. The flight was late or something. We had to run through the airport, but I was reading a book at the time called Designing for Emotion by Aaron Walter, who's one of the, at least up until recently, head of design for MailChimp. It was a great book, a lot of interesting stuff. And when we set out with this company, we always wanted to make finances like easy and fun and engaging, and not just being a database dump from a table set of data from a bank's systems. And we hadn't really prepared ahead of time for this particular talk. We just wrote the whole presentation on a plane, no Wi-Fi or anything. So, but we did draw quite a bit of inspiration from that book. So I'm pretty sure that the emotional part of it is heavily connected to that book's name itself. I think I even had it with me on the flight. And we might have even included some samples from the book as well in this presentation. And then we finished it up in the hotel room, like quite late. I think we did a decent job. Like heavily tackled that, but I think
I almost remember the second when it landed on us. This is not right. We cannot stand by as bank are ignoring people's feelings. This is about the emotion in banking and the title of our emotional banking presentation. The people slightly rolled their eyes when they saw that title back in the day. They did for many years afterwards, I'll tell you that much. But the sentiment was coming from that. We were creating technology that necessarily going to empower a great user experience unless people understood user experiences on the front end. This, for anyone listening, was from a company that was building the guts of the system. We were making the back end of the software, not the front end. So, yeah, Einar and I arrived at the idea that emotions are what counts really in this banking sphere of ours. And how else are we going to power them unless we have the data properly sorted, which is what we were doing at the time. What has happened to you to arrive before this moment in time when you met in FinTech? How did you arrive at the trendy understanding from software agile user-led guy that I met in 2010? What was your journey until that?
Started in working online in the internet business, what you might call it, somewhat early on, like last century, I guess. Got my first properly paid job probably in the summer of 2000. Just building websites here in Iceland for a company. And loved the industry. It was so exciting, so many things happening. I started as a developer, but I really wanted to hone in on my design skills. So I actually left Iceland to move to New York to go to a design school. It's like a blend, at the time it's called multimedia. So it's a blend of technology, a blend of design. And at that time, I read a book by Jacob Nielsen, which is called something like Usability, or something of that sorts. And it just dawned up on me, like, why are we building all these things that people can't use them? So, and when I came back home from New York after a few years, I actually got a job at a bank as a front-end developer / designer. And this particular organization, which was growing quite fast, they really had the empowered teams back then, like technical team. I mean, there was a business side as well, but the technical team, we had like a great, nice office location. We kind of got to do whatever we wanted to do, and there was just so much trust in us building the right solutions. So we started really thinking about user experience, usability, accessibility, like very early on. I think I personally hand-coded if online bank in the world that was like properly accessible, web standards based, like from HTML like CSS driven bank, and this is like 2003. So very early on, but then I gradually moved more into the business side, as well as the bank was growing. I mean, it's the Icelandic financial wonder. When we thought we were the best in the world, and this particular bank grew overseas as well. And at some point in time, we had like offices in 10 countries. We're buying other banks, and somehow I was made like a executive director for global internet strategy, whatever that means. At a fairly early age, I was like 26 at the time. So we were managing all of the online banks and the websites and like mortgage calculations, savings, and helping people grow their assets. Of course, then the financial crash came, and I actually stayed on with the bank. I mean, the bank technically survived. Of course, it became a small Icelandic bank again.
Small but nimble, small and smart.
And actually, yeah, kind of. But at the time, there was not really much growth. We're more focused on helping people that had gone through the crash. Like people had lost a lot of money, also lost a lot of faith in the banks. And so a lot of what we're doing, we're just trying to help people survive, save their houses and such, figuring out ways to like modify loans, and because there's a lot of like loans in that foreign currency that had the value of the Icelandic currency had crashed quite heavily. So we went from owing, like your market's kind of like doubled overnight or even tripled. And so quite a few people were in a really, really bad situation. And actually right before the crash, we had a small internal project going on, which we called the Phoenix, where we were actually looking at companies like Mint.com and taking inspiration from Google and Apple and all these great companies building really awesome user experiences. Like, how can we build an online bank that is more modern, that's like a great search and provides valuable insights? So this project, of course, was killed with the banking crash as well.
But
there was still
what
an
year was
idea
this?
that
Please, everyone, take note. When this Phoenix Crypt existed in this bank,
this is
6 or
2006,
7. This
7.
is what most banks have had this conversation sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. So we still had this idea in the back of our heads, like we really want to do this. Right now, we can't really get the funding to actually build this, but it was still something that we felt was exciting and needed for the market. I guess sometime in 2009, there was just a knock on the door, and these two entrepreneurs came to see us. And like, hey, we have a business idea. Yes, basically had a mock-up built in Excel. We kind of want to do this with banking data, analyze your transactions, give you visuals on your spending behaviors and patterns, and do some analysis and suggestions. Like, this is what we want to build. So, like, they basically asked for like, if you are willing to pay us a relatively low amount of money, then we can go ahead and build this. And I think they actually went to all of the banks in Iceland, but not many. They're like 3 big banks. The other two said no. We were like, hell yes, we'll give you like this small seed funding because they're not really investing in them, and it was prepaid for the solution that they were going to deliver. So this was George, the founder and CEO of Meniga, and Ásgeir, the CTO founder of Meniga. So they came back in, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months with a product. They just went ahead and built it. And so I was actually in charge of integrating this into the online bank. So I got to work very closely with them and came up with all kinds of ideas for the improving the search and the interface, and because they're really smart technical guys. The solution worked great. There was just they didn't really have a UX or a design person working for them full time. There was a guy that came in and did the logo and basics of the UI. Didn't really have time to think everything properly through because they were a tiny startup with no funding. So it was a lot of back and forth. I was giving them some ideas, and really enjoyed working with them because they could deliver things really, really fast. And then in the summer of 2010, I was actually on holiday. I kind of made a decision because I was also going on paternity leave, so it was a 4-month block of me being away, that maybe it's time that I do something else. I've been in this doing banking stuff for 7 years. It's a great ride. It's not as exciting anymore because there was no global growth, less development, at least on my personal side. So I actually saw that they had advertised for a role of VP product. I had never heard of a product manager before, to be honest. I had been performing that role,
that's right,
with all kinds of different titles, like team lead, development lead, project manager, I don't know, director, webmaster.
Because
but I read the description and was like, hey, this sounds kind of cool.
Resident adult is what I call it sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I think there were 3 people that applied at that point. It was a tiny startup. There were 3 or 4 people working out of a modified schoolroom that had to be turned into some sort of a incubator or a startup funding. But they just got funding. They got $1 million from a local VC. It's fuck it, I'm gonna do for the language because I would beat that up.
What I think here, no worries.
Yeah. So I'm gonna leave my very comfortable, fairly lucrative banking job and join this startup that has only one client, basically me, the bank that I was working for. And then I knew that we were not paying them tons of money, but I had believed in the founders. At this point, Ásgeir's brother had also joined, who I'd known quite well throughout the years because me and him kind of had similar roles while he was in this other bank. So we were competing on hiring people and getting awards. So
this is actually hilarious because this is an amazing. I didn't even realize that it's hilarious because it's an absolute parallel to how Georg and I, meanwhile, were competing in the same in existing industry. We were. He was looking for a company called Mice and Men or such, and I was working for a company in Sweden called Weird Solutions, and we were both selling IP address management for a few years before we met at Meniga. So it's hilarious.
So he was in a way an nemesis, but he was always a nice guy.
He's an amazing guy, so we hope to have him on Developer Insight one day, and I hope everyone listens to the episode if we get him to tell us some more stories. Ásgeir has them all.
Definitely, yeah. So I joined the company. I think you joined.
Right, and you'll never let me forget that you are employee 5, not right. And we did, and the rest is history. Because what followed is essentially, is it 3 years? We did 4 years. I don't even, maybe more, 5 years of being on the road practically, as Einar was alluding to earlier, where himself and I were a team for a long while, precisely explaining what we're doing to banks around the world, and whilst doing that, growing the need for doing any of this, because what we were practically selling was avant-garde for most of the banks that we were we were meeting, right? We were a Northern European product of ours, which was how to categorize your bloody transactions and how to do something with them on the front end when you care about your consumer. But what maybe escapes people, and I did say it in the book a number of times, so I think it's really interesting, is we lived through what I would call product-led era. The companies that were making the products then ourselves, the back bases, even some parts of the FISs of the world and so on, those were the companies that were practically driving the discourse in terms of strategy, simply because they were making the software. They were the much shorter feedback loop to an innovation cycle that banks had no access to. And these were the days green walls of fake grass in innovation labs. These were the wild days of things like 2010, 11. So in fact, our CEO, for context for anyone listening, was hired us both because the push in his eyes was, and we'll have to give it to him, this was his strategy, that this amazing product he had made in Iceland had now become of age, and it was time for it to become seen by the world. So he brought it to this massive stage that any listeners to this would know the name of, called Finovate, which back in the day was a different show than what I have surmised it may be today. But what did we do next, Einar? If you want to walk us through the story.
So we came to Finovate. So we had actually gone to Finovate in New York. So at least me and George. I don't know if you had started at that time. It was like September 2010. We saw quite a few companies present, including what's the name? The Spanish competitor of Meniga. So, anyways, I sat there, saw these demos, and I'm like, wow, these companies are amazing. These products are beautiful. Like, we have so much work to do. How can we ever compete? Like, and then we went to Finovate, but we at the time we were building this new product as an add-on to our core solution, and this is what we took to Finovate, and just crossing fingers that these other companies, or Strands was a company, hoping that these other competitors would not have gone and done something even better. And I remember we were almost the last company to go on stage, and I had spoken to Simon Taylor during lunch just briefly, and I saw him post on Twitter because there was like so many companies doing similar things that we did. I don't know if you were the PFM to come on stage. And I saw him swear on Twitter before we went on stage, like, not another PFM, like personal finance management solution. Like, we've seen too many, they're all so boring. When we got down from stage, the first thing I see it was his tweet, like, this was amazing. I want my bank to adopt this solution. And that just took us from being like a tiny small startup run from a school, old classroom in Reykjavik with like a single customer to I don't know if you recall, when we were trying to contact banks and try to get a meeting, like they wouldn't even answer us.
Overnight, didn't we?
Overnight, we got the best of show, and the booth was so crowded. I mean, we were like 3 or 4 of us standing there, and we didn't really know what to do. We were just bombarded by all of these customers or potential customers, interested people coming in and talking to us, getting a demo, and exhausted.
We're praying that he was the architect of keeping people in their seats to see your demo, but I believe so. I think
really?
it might even be that Brett King will say that he did, because all of these people were names that were super international, of course, on Twitter. But yes, Simon, bless him. There's been a number of people who have influential in ways that they don't know, to at least get people in the room to see what amazing thing we had made. And then, yes, we were rock stars. It was insane. We hit the road right afterwards. And I think those first few weeks, you and I must have done 2 international trips a week, simply redoing that same Finovate demo on 2 porky bags.
Yeah, and this was basically on repeat. And then after each Finovate demo, so annually, I mean, we always set up a team to do some new innovation, especially for Finovate. We wanted to do a product launch, really. So building on the infrastructure and the innovation engine that we have built, like, what can we use this data for? And so after each turn, we generally got an award, and best of show, at least in some cases. And then all of these banks wanted to just come and visit and showcase this again. And like at the time, I recall when we were in Amsterdam seeing the ING Innovation Lab, and they had a huge innovation lab. This was early on. When I saw it, I was amazed. Like there's so many companies here and all of this new technology that they're playing with and
I think that's an
looking
interesting one.
into.
This is touched on. Maybe we should scroll back and think about that one a little bit. So we saw, because of where we were placed, right, as being the early employees in a startup that was taking the market so early on, doing such a cool product. We saw a lot of the moves, and by the moves we mean innovation, CFR versus the innovation ingenuity of real places that were doing real things. So we've also seen exceptional entrepreneurs. One was mentioned earlier at the time. I think someone was in Barclays at the time. Indeed, yes. In fact, many of the names that we would drop here. Simon Alessandro Hatami was one of our massive meetings back in the day when he was a banker and we were an aspiring software provider. I mean, the things we could tell people over a beer. But all of these people may have been in different positions, but what they were all doing is figuring out kind of where does it all land in terms of digital. We were practically the first to use the term in FinTech. By we, obviously, I have to bow down to the people that wrote the books that you and I read. So, of course, we have to mention the titles of FinTech before we say anything else. But when we arrived, if you wish, this was such the dark ages of FinTech that there were maybe 20 reports. I mean, actually, there were not 20 reports. There were maybe 5 reports in total on the topic of technology in banking out there, some of which are written by people that are still names in the industry. Tessa Cohen had written a report, if you remember. Is it Ron that had written the brand of Snark hadn't yet been built? He was writing fewer reports. But we were taking kind of knowledge from that, and then obviously Brett's book was possibly the first out there to put digital out clearly and precise. But that was the atmosphere of everyone trying to make the best they could, of writing about it, of building, because the need for there to be a lot of change on the delivery side and on the consumer side and on the strategy side. And the need for peace was very clear to everyone, I would say. So there were magical times. But it also allowed us, and I think that's important to say, and I don't know if you felt it the same way I did, and into the organizational mire of why technology and innovation wouldn't move as fast as it would like to. So what would you say is the number one culprit as to why organizations don't do better if they are big and old?
So I've given this a lot of thought, and this is really why I left FinTech. So the people in this position within these big organizations, and I don't know if the size of them actually matters. I mean, we sold to Commerzbank and Banco Santander. I mean, these are huge banks, but they had big believers internally, people of influence that were able to push for solutions like ours to be implemented. And they working in digital within these organizations, they come to the shows, they see the demos, they see the potential and have a vision. And they are our believers and they really like what can be done. But that's kind of where it stops. It's when you need to go back to the CFO or whoever the head of IT who's in charge of the actual expenses. Like, we want to bring in this innovation type thing, but what's the benefit? If it's not a purely financial benefit, and like the willingness to actually innovate with these solutions kind of gets killed. So everybody wants to innovate, but then it's a big bang, so we just kind of don't. And then if you do the implementation, they don't do it fully or properly, so you only get half the value or even less. So because I was tired in the end after like 6 years, like traveling and running around, and I mean the company grew so fast. It was an amazing time. I mean, I learned so much. I met so many wonderful people. I worked with so many great colleagues. I was just exhausted with the travel. I mean, my kids were crying when I was leaving to jump on a plane again, often with just an hour's notice. Hey, can you be in Warsaw tomorrow for a meeting? Like, back to the airport. But it was also the fact that, regardless of what we did, not everything that we were building was being adopted. There was a claim for the willingness for it to be adopted, but it was not always done properly. And it felt kind of sad that, like, I'm not seeing what I'm building
The
being put
feedback
out
was
there.
loop was way too great in many ways, and I share what you're
Yeah.
in your obviously adventure and frustration, and we've lived the same lived experience. But kind of when I first arrived at this idea of human debt, I knew that that's something that without having the work, is something that you and I have felt every day in every organization, because the only people that we've ever met who had become the engineers of these massive changes and the architects of these systems had practically been entrepreneurs fighting against masses of human debt around it and trying to assuage politics and trying to find ways in which the bureaucratic mammoth wouldn't notice the innovation is being, I mean, the codes, the stories. And do you remember, speaking of Strands, whose name we forgot, to think that they were our most bitter competitor, that we lost nights over, you and I. But anyway, do you remember when there was a story that the World Bank was telling us that Strands was asked to actually, and we were asked, and they said no, to they scrape the data of the actual bank because they were not allowed access to their own back end by their powers that be. That's the environment in which some people still manage to get innovation over the line. So obviously they became our heroes, but we kept seeing their fight, and many of these people are super burnt out themselves, and they've left FinTech themselves, and they're doing other things. I do have this personal theory that those years of extreme innovation that we've produced has probably rinsed us really well, most of us, and we're going to need a minute to take it a lot easier and reframe like you have done and many of us have. So that could have been part of it. I think what was extraordinary back in that day, and I think one of the things that they now can speak about, and it's hard to explain otherwise, is there was a sense of building big things with a lot of modesty, if you wish. But maybe it's just because you're Icelandic, I think. I've had the honor through Meniga to meet a good a few tens, and say hundreds of Icelandic people, maybe hundreds. And that's significant, that's a proportion, that is a percentage. And I am very proud of my knowledge of the people. And indeed, they are a very special type of people that have heart in everything and are also very fair. You see that that's part of why technology and innovation comes easier to you.
So there are many elements to the Icelandic mindset, and I think we share many things with our neighboring countries. And I actually think of the US as a neighboring country, because it's kind of right in between Scandinavia and the US. So I think the biggest benefit, that you might call it some other words, but because we are a small country, if we need to get something done, we can generally just knock on a door or call somebody who knows somebody, and the door has been opened. That's just kind of the Icelandic mentality. We don't use surnames. Politics are relatively minor within organizations, so we don't really have this buffer. Like we will go out, meet with somebody like the head of something from Commerzbank, and tell them, yeah, we can support 10 million users with like billions of data points sorted across. They're like, we hadn't done it before. We'll just figure it out. And then we did. So we are extremely resourceful, and we just get things done. But in a way, you could say it's also kind of foolish. But I think there are other countries that would never, like, like Germans. To me, I mean, they're like awesome people, but they are like it's a kind of like a yes or no. Like, can I do this? Like, no, we haven't done it before. So they might not overpromise. But we in our small country mindset silliness, we just like, well,
I would say that's
we'll figure it out.
very good interview. That's just being courageous.
Small,
and it is at the same time.
I guess, but
it is.
But it's a country that has to be had to been like throughout the years and centuries. You had to be very innovative to be able to survive on this island. I mean, there are volcanoes and bad weather and just trees. We can't really build houses, and the only way to get off this island is on a boat. So
true. Good point.
At least as I in my mind. But you will find these types of people everywhere, of course. But it's a general concept. I think it's
One of the stories that I'm like most, I mean, there are hundreds of stories of Iceland I'd love to tell, but maybe not today, all of them. But the truth is that there is an overall feeling of warmth you get in the middle of a very inhospitable place as soon as you go to Iceland and you know a couple of people, just genuinely good-hearted human. And on top of everything, the thing that I have honestly always started with is the fact that they are, if any, minuses overly modest, and that's maybe a little bit of an insular mentality that I've noticed in with Australians as well and other places where people are, other than the English, who quite frankly can use a serious dose of that. Everyone else seems to believe that they are less than they are. So I think, I've met such incredible innovation, such amazing women that have done very solidly sustainable things. There are a number of names that you maybe meet on this podcast as well. We have a couple of guests later on. But there's no shouting from the mountains about the many wins of the technology and innovation arena in Iceland, but there should be a lot less modest.
So this is also why we hired the head of sales not from Iceland. I mean, we wanted the loudest person in the room, so we
Right,
hired
I know
you.
what you mean. It's easier when someone else thinks you're praises than if you do it yourself. That's very, very true. But again, very, very lucky to have worked with yourself, Einar, and it's one of the pride and joy of my career. I've learned a lot from you. We've learned together.
Same
We've
here.
learned about humans. We've learned about this horrible human that we found everywhere. But that if you have your mind in the right place and you really want a technology that goes to humans with other humans in teams that are empowered, then you're going to get that. So thanks for talking to us, and keep these ones short, because let's face it, if anyone in the financial technology is going to be listening to us, they ain't got the time. They have to still figure out the point of Bitcoin. So with that, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks a lot, Einar, and see you soon, hopefully.
Same here.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.